So I had a question come through. What is the addition of ordinates? How on earth does it work? How on earth does it function? What is it good for? And I've got some pretty huge spoilers. Some pretty big news about addition of ordinates that I think is really important. It's important that every student knows about these things. They're completely useless. They are a total waste of time, and to be perfectly honest, in the last 5 or 6 years that I've been tutoring, I have never once found an occasion where it was a useful skill to have, and I've never seen it assessed in an exam. To give you a brief overview of what it actually is, just so that you've got a little bit of context, addition of ordinates is the process of combining two separate functions and using a graphical method to approach how the two functions together, if they were say added, would appear on a graph. So for example, if you've got x squared plus 1 over x. As a whole function, that's quite intimidating to sketch, but you can sketch x squared and you can sketch 1 over x. And addition of ordinates is this idea that you could put the two graphs together and somehow visually represent them, and that would give you a fair assumption of what the graph of the larger scale function would actually look like. The concept is actually relatively simple. It's for every x coordinate on either one of the graphs, you add the y coordinates together. That's basically it. The problem is the fact that it's done entirely graphically, often without any points at all given to you, which means it's very hard to add y coordinates together when you don't have them. On the other hand, if they actually give you the equations, then you don't need to add the y coordinates together on the graph because you can just work out values in the equation. So you're kind of stuck in this weird limbo. You've either got two graphs with no coordinates, in which case very hard to conceptualize how to add them together, or you're given a full equation, in which case you don't actually need the graph in the first place, you can just find values. So the concept of addition of ordinates, I guess it makes sense, it's just not particularly useful. It doesn't really serve any purpose. My advice to you is if you're tackling problems where you've got two functions added together, and you're trying to sketch it by hand, you've got no calculator access available to you, a question is expecting you to be able to do it because of you know how to do addition of ordinates, my advice to you, really simply, draw a table. Go back to the basics that you were doing when you first started learning to graph. Now I'm talking like year 8, year 9, and you would set up a table of values, have a bunch of x values, and then you'd have a bunch of y values that correspond to those x values, and you used the equation to find the y values. Once you had a bunch of points, typically, you would mark all of them on your graph, draw as smooth a curve as you can through them. That was your graph. It was the only way that you knew how to graph functions back in the day. My advice to you when you're dealing with these complex functions, go back to the basics. Those tables do not fail. They work every single time. They provide a huge amount of benefit. They're able to be done quickly and efficiently, and they don't require any conceptual thinking or any out-of-the-box creativity, weird problem-solving sort of situations that typically don't actually work anyway. Don't get me wrong, I love conceptual thinking and I love the idea of thinking outside the box to solve maths problems. The issue is that addition of ordinates, as well as like sum and product functions, they're a very convoluted way to deal with an otherwise relatively straightforward problem. It is unnecessary the amount of complexity that it is added into problems just to solve them, when realistically you could just draw up a table and you'd get a graph done. So if you're in one of those positions where you're thinking, addition of ordinates, is it really important? Is it something that I need to know? To be perfectly honest, no, it's not. It's not a huge component of the curriculum. It's definitely not a huge component of the exam, and you can get by every single problem without having to deal with it. Just go back to the basics that you know about graphing functions that you're unfamiliar with. Create a table with a bunch of x values, sub them all in to find corresponding y values, plot all of those points, draw a graph through it. You'll be as close to done as you possibly can. Addition of ordinates is not going to help you speed that process along in any way. It's not going to make your life simpler. It's not even going to make your life more efficient. There is actually no advantage to dealing with that particular concept in methods, which is probably a huge weight off your shoulders. So you're welcome. I'll catch up with you guys next time.